at revenge sins. There are moments that feel quiet on the surface and loud underneath. The room is full, the voices sound polite, and something still lands like a door closing. Nora Bellamy lived inside one of those moments. She wasn't the kind of person who fought in front of people. She kept things moving, kept things smooth, and in return, her own grief got treated like extra clutter. This is where her memory starts. I was still wearing the black dress, the one my mother insisted looked appropriate, even though it didn't feel like mine. My feet hurt. My hands smelled like dish soap and lemon because I'd been wiping down counters since the first guest arrived. The house was finally emptying out. The last car door shut out front. Then the driveway went quiet. Inside, the only sound was the low hum of the fridge and the soft clink of glass as my brother set his tumbler down like he owned the place. Mom stayed in the dining room after everyone left. Cynthia Bellamy didn't slump or cry when the crowd disappeared. She straightened, like the performance had ended and the real meeting could begin. Lucas was there too, leaning against the doorway, still in his suit, scrolling like nothing had happened today except free food and a few handshakes. A man I didn't recognize sat at the long table with a folder open. He had clean shoes and a hard-looking smile, the kind of smile that made you feel measured. Mom tapped the folder with one fingernail. "We're not keeping the East Wing. It's dead space." The man nodded. "If you open it up, you'll change the whole footprint. Better resale, better use of the land." Lucas lifted his drink. "That's what I told her. Grandpa hoarded rooms like secrets. Nobody said his name. Frederick, my grandfather, the man whose funeral we had just finished." I carried a tray of glasses toward the kitchen and tried to move like air. Mom's eyes flicked toward the mantel, where Grandpa's old chess book sat next to a framed photo of him in a fishing hat. The book looked worn in a way that felt familiar. It had been there my whole life. My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. "Can I have that chess book, the one from the mantel? Grandpa taught me with it." Mom looked at me like the help had spoken out of turn. Lucas didn't even look up from his phone. "She wants a souvenir." Mom let out a short laugh. "That thing smells like smoke. It belongs in the trash." I stepped closer anyway. "It matters to me." She stood, walked to the mantel, picked up the book with 2 fingers, and held it away from her body like it was dirty laundry. For a second, I thought she might hand it over and let the moment pass. Instead, she turned and dropped it straight into the kitchen garbage can. The sound was dull, heavy, final. Lucas smiled into his glass. Efficient. Mom tipped the leftover bourbon from a crystal tumbler into the trash. It splashed, dark and slow, soaking the book like a stain that could never come out. That was when something in me went still. We watched plenty of family scenes like this on the channel, and the room always shifts the same way. Not louder, just colder. Mom brushed her hands together. "Get that junk out of my sight." I didn't move. Not right away. My throat tightened, but my face stayed flat. If you've been following Revenge Sins, you already know how these stories turn when someone decides not to react the way they're expected to. I picked up the empty tray, walked into the kitchen, and started rinsing glasses with shaking hands. Lucas's laughter drifted in from the dining room, low and satisfied. I waited until their voices moved farther away, until I heard the patio door slide open. Then I went back to the trash can, reached in, and pulled the book out. It was heavier than I remembered, wet, ruined, and I held it like it could still hear me. I took the book to the sink and turned on the water before I thought about it. Cold first, then warm. The cover darkened as the bourbon ran off, pooling near the drain. The spine was warped, soft under my thumbs. It smelled like alcohol and old paper and something burned. I laid it flat on a towel and pressed down gently. "Like that might help." Lucas's voice drifted in from the patio. "You think she even noticed?" Mom laughed. "She always notices. That doesn't mean she understands." A chair scraped. Someone lit a cigarette. The sound of the lighter felt louder than it should have. I kept my head down and worked at the pages, separating them carefully. The book was thicker than I remembered, heavier. The weight surprised me when I lifted it to blot the water out of the middle. That's when I felt it. Not the paper. Something firmer. I stopped. The kitchen clock ticked. The faucet kept running. My hands didn't move for a second, like they were waiting for permission. I slid a finger along the inside seam. The pages gave way in a clean line. Too clean. Hollow. Inside was an envelope. Heavy stock. Cream-colored. Sealed, but swollen from moisture. A corner of a stamp showed through the paper. My heart didn't race. It dropped. Hard, like my body knew before my head caught up. I peeled the envelope open and pulled the pages out slowly. They were folded once, then again. Precise. Legal paper. The kind with margins that don't forgive mistakes. At the top was my grandfather's name. Frederick Bellamy. Printed, clear. My breath came shallow as I scanned down. The words registered out of order at first. Trust. Beneficiary. Soul. I pressed the pages flat on the counter, smoothing them with my palm. The notary seal was there. Faded, but real. There was a date from years back, long before he got sick, long before Mom started calling the house an investment. Tucked behind the last page was a smaller note. His handwriting leaned to the right. Careful, but familiar. If they throw this away, it means they've already chosen. I closed my eyes and leaned my hip against the counter. The house creaked as someone walked overhead. The patio door slid open again. Mom's voice floated in. We'll list by the end of the month. Quietly. Lucas answered. Casual. She won't push back. I folded the papers and slid them back into the book. My hands were steady now. That surprised me. I wrapped the book in the towel, tucked it under my arm, and carried it upstairs. The guest room door shut softly behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall until the noise downstairs faded into nothing. I didn't feel brave. I didn't feel clever. I felt clear. Whatever they thought this house was, whatever they thought I was, they were already moving without looking at the board. I didn't sleep much. The guest room mattress dipped in the middle, and every time I shifted, the springs answered back. I kept the book wrapped in the towel on the chair beside the bed, like it might wander off if I looked away too long. Morning came thin and gray through the curtains. Downstairs, cabinets opened and closed. Coffee brewed. Normal sounds. That almost made it worse. I waited until I heard Mom's heels on the hardwood. She always wore them first thing, like the house needed reminding who was in charge. When I came into the kitchen, Lucas was already there, scrolling on his phone with one hand and stirring his mug with the other. Mom stood at the counter, hair pulled back tight, reading something on her tablet. She glanced up. You look tired. I shrugged. Long night. Lucas smirked without lifting his eyes. You always did better on less sleep. Remember finals week Mom cut him a look. Eat. I poured myself coffee. Black. My hands didn't shake, but I noticed how careful I was with the mug, how I set it down exactly in the center of the coaster. Mom swiped at her screen. The realtor's calling later. We'll need you out of the house for showings. Okay. Lucas looked up then. That was easy. I met his eyes for a second longer than usual. He frowned, just slightly, like he'd felt something and didn't like it. You're not taking anything sentimental, Mom added. We'll go through the rest later. I nodded. I already packed. That was true. In a way. She watched me over the rim of her cup. You've been very agreeable. The word landed heavier than she meant it to. I don't see the point in arguing. Lucas laughed. There it is. Growth. I finished my coffee and rinsed the mug. The water ran hot. Too hot. I pulled my hand back and dried it on my jeans. As I left the room, Mom called after me. We'll talk numbers soon. Numbers. Like that settled it. Upstairs. I closed the guest room door and leaned against it. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. A missed call. Unknown number. No voicemail. I sat on the bed and unwrapped the towel. The book lay there, quiet, heavy. I knew if I said anything now, they'd close ranks, papers would disappear, stories would change. I'd become the problem. So I didn't say a word. I put the book back in the chair, picked up my phone, and saved the number under a name I hadn't used in years, Frederick's attorney. Then I waited. The attorney called back that afternoon. I was sitting on the floor of the guest room with my back against the bed, folding clothes I didn't plan to take anywhere yet. Is this Nora Bellamy? Yes? A pause. Paper shifting. Your grandfather asked me to recognize your voice before anything else. That line hit harder than I expected. I pressed my thumb into the carpet and breathed through it. He said if you ever called, it meant things had moved faster than he wanted. I found the book. Another pause. Longer this time. All right. Then listen carefully. We didn't talk long. He didn't need to explain the will to me. He told me where the registered copy was. He told me what not to do. And he told me something that stuck. Silence helps more than urgency in situations like this. After the call, I sat there until my legs went numb. Downstairs, the house stayed busy. Boxes came out of the storage room. Labels appeared on doors. Lucas took a call in the hallway and lowered his voice when I passed. I started to notice what they didn't notice about me. Mom never checked my room. Not once. She assumed I'd take what she allowed and leave the rest behind. Lucas didn't bother tracking where I went during the day. He had spreadsheets and calls and a schedule that didn't include me. They weren't watching. They didn't think they needed to. 2 days later, I told Mom I had a doctor's appointment. She waved me off without looking up. Don't be gone long. The office smelled like antiseptic and lemon cleaner. The woman at the desk smiled like she meant it and slid a clipboard across. Take your time. The doctor spoke plainly. Asked about sleep, focus, stress. He listened without interrupting. At the end, he folded his hands and nodded once. You're clear. I thanked him and left with the paperwork tucked inside a plain folder. No one asked where I'd been when I got back. That night, Lucas knocked on my door for the first time since the funeral. Mom thinks you're taking this better than expected. I stayed seated on the bed. I don't see the benefit in making things harder. He leaned against the frame, studying me. You always did disappear when things got uncomfortable. The words were meant to settle me back into place. They almost worked. I learned early. I answered, keeping my voice even. Lucas smiled, satisfied. Good. Makes this easier on everyone. After he left, I closed the door and sat there in the quiet, the folder on my lap, the book hidden under the bed. They thought absence meant weakness. They thought quiet meant empty. And they kept moving forward like the space around them was theirs alone. The tension showed up in small ways first. Mom stopped humming in the mornings. The mail got opened the second it hit the counter. Lucas started pacing during phone calls, walking the length of the hallway like the walls might listen. I stayed where I was useful. One afternoon, I was wiping down the dining table when Mom snapped, "Leave that. It's clean." Her voice sounded thin, tight around the edges. Lucas stood by the window with his phone pressed to his ear. "No, that doesn't work. I said we need time." He lowered the phone. Jaw set. They're pushing. Mom crossed her arms. Of course they are. I moved slower, giving them space. The house felt smaller lately, like it was closing in. Later that night, I heard raised voices through the vent above my room. Not yelling. Worse. Controlled. "We can't wait for a buyer," Mom said. "I need liquidity now." Lucas sighed. "You always say that word like it's magic. It means cash." She shot back. "It means I can breathe." There was a pause. A long one. "I know a group." Lucas finally offered private capital, short term. Ugly interest, but fast. Mom's voice dropped. "How fast? A couple of weeks. Less if we rush it." And the house a chair scraped. Collateral. I sat on the edge of my bed with my shoes still on, listening. My pulse stayed steady. That surprised me. Mom exhaled. We can't afford complications. They don't dig if you don't give them time to dig. Another pause. Then, softer. Is it clean? Lucas didn't answer right away. When he did, it came clipped, clean enough. The next morning, a stranger walked through the front door like he belonged there, mid-40s, crisp jacket, shoes that didn't scuff the floor. Lucas clapped him on the shoulder. Nora, this is Evan. He's helping us bridge a few things. Evan smiled. Nice place. I nodded and stepped aside. Mom poured coffee without offering me any. We're finalizing paperwork soon. I'll need you out during meetings. Of course. Evan's eyes flicked toward me, then away. He wasn't measuring me. He was already done. That evening, Lucas left a folder on the kitchen island. Thin, temporary. I wiped around it carefully, memorizing the header upside down. Loan terms, disbursement, a number written out in careful print. 390,000. Mom leaned over it, finger tapping. That barely covers what's due. It buys time. I hate buying time. You hate being cornered more. Silence followed. Thick, heavy. Mom's voice softened. We'll fix it after. Lucas nodded. We always do. I finished the dishes and dried my hands. As I turned away, Lucas called out, almost casual. You're being real cooperative lately. I met his eyes, held them. I'm tired. He accepted that like a gift. Upstairs. I closed my door and pulled the book out from under the bed. The cover was still warped, the pages stiff. I pressed my palm against it until the paper warmed. They were moving fast now, cutting corners, relying on habits. And nobody was watching me. The signing happened on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that felt unfinished even before it started. Gray light pressed against the windows. The house stayed quiet in a way that felt practiced. Mom wanted the library. She always did when something mattered. The long table was cleared except for a leather folder, a legal pad, and a stack of papers squared so carefully they looked ironed. A man in a dark blazer sat nearest the window, laptop open, fingers resting on the keys without moving. Another woman stood near the bookshelf, setting out a stamp and an ink pad with deliberate care. Lucas hovered, restless, smoothing his tie, checking his watch. Mom adjusted her chair and glanced at the door. Where's Nora? Lucas's eyes flicked up the stairs. Probably hiding. I'm right here. They turned as one. I held a tray with 3 cups of coffee, the porcelain clinking softly as I walked. My hands were steady. That mattered more than I expected. The man by the window nodded once. Thanks. I set the cups down and stepped back. No one told me to leave. Mom scanned the first page. We're clear to proceed. The man tapped a few keys. Once everything's signed, funds move immediately. Lucas leaned over her shoulder. You'll see it in the account today. The woman by the bookshelf spoke for the first time. I'll need identification before I notarize. Mom slid her wallet across the table without hesitation. Paper shifted. Pens clicked open. The room filled with small sounds that felt louder than they should have. I stayed by the sideboard, wiping an already clean surface with a cloth. Slow. Careful. Lucas pointed to a line halfway down the page. Here. And here. Mom didn't ask questions. She signed where he indicated, her name firm. Practiced. The ink dried almost instantly. The man by the window glanced up. This confirms ownership. Mom smiled. Tight. It's always been mine. Another page. Another signature. The woman lifted the stamp and pressed it down. The sound landed heavy. Final. I looked at the portrait of Grandpa on the wall. His eyes seemed softer than I remembered. The man typed again. All right. Initiating transfer. Mom exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. Lucas's phone buzzed. He checked it and grinned. "It's done." The man turned the laptop so they could see. 390,000 dispersed. Mom's shoulders dropped. She laughed once, sharp and relieved. Finally. I stepped forward, keeping my voice level. So the house is officially leveraged now. Mom turned toward me, irritation flashing across her face. "Yes, it is," Lucas added, casual, bridge loan, temporary. I nodded. "Okay." That was all. I picked up the empty cups and moved toward the door. My heart thudded once, hard, then settled. Behind me. Mom said, "You can clean up after." "I will." In the hallway, I reached into my pocket and pressed my thumb against my phone screen. No rush, no hesitation. I stood there, listening to the murmur of voices from the library, the low hum of the laptop, the sound of a pen being capped and set aside. They were smiling now. They had signed, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt the house breathe. The knock didn't come right away. I was in the kitchen rinsing the cloth I'd used upstairs when the house went still. No voices, no footsteps, just that tight quiet that settles before something changes. Then the doorbell rang. Lucas answered it. I didn't hear what was said at first, only his voice shifting, losing its casual edge. "Hold on." Mom appeared in the hallway, already annoyed. "What now?" A man stepped inside with a folder tucked under his arm. Neat suit, neutral expression, the kind of face that doesn't belong to either side. Lucas straightened. "This won't take long." They moved into the living room. I stayed where I was, leaning against the counter, my hands damp. The man opened the folder. Emergency guardianship order, effective immediately. Mom blinked. Guardianship of who Lucas didn't look at her. "Nora." My name landed between us like dropped glass. The man continued, voice steady. "Temporary order. 72 hours pending review." Mom's mouth opened, then closed. "That's ridiculous." Lucas finally met my eyes. There was something almost gentle there. "It's for your own good." I walked into the room slowly. "On what grounds?" He lifted a page. "History of treatment. Emotional instability following your father's death. Concerns about impaired judgment." Mom turned toward me, confusion giving way to recognition. "You never told me this was still an issue." Lucas shrugged. "She didn't need to." The man cleared his throat. "Until this is resolved, decisions regarding the estate and related matters fall to the appointed guardian." Lucas slid the document back into the folder. That would be me. The air felt thinner. My ears rang, faintly. I looked at Mom. She studied the page like it was a receipt she didn't remember asking for. Then she smiled. Slow, careful. "So this takes care of the problem." Lucas nodded. Cleanly. I felt my pulse in my neck, steady but loud. I kept my voice even. "You filed this today." He didn't deny it. It was time. The man glanced at me, then away. "You'll be contacted for a hearing." Mom stepped closer. "You should go rest." I didn't move. Lucas shifted his weight. "We're done here." The man nodded and left without another word. The front door closed. The lock clicked. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Mom broke it first. "I told you this would be easier if you stayed out of it," Lucas added, almost kindly. "We're protecting you." I looked at the staircase, the curve of the banister worn smooth by decades of hands that weren't mine. I turned and walked upstairs without responding. In the guest room, I shut the door and sat on the bed. My phone vibrated once, then again. I didn't pick it up yet. Downstairs, I heard Mom laugh, just once, relieved. They thought the pause meant they'd won. The lawyer arrived before sunset. I heard his voice downstairs first, low and calm, cutting through the house like it belonged there. That alone told me something had shifted. I came down slowly. Mom and Lucas were already in the living room. The folder from earlier sat on the coffee table. angled toward Lucas like a shield. The attorney stood near the window, coat still on, briefcase at his feet. He nodded when he saw me. No smile. Just recognition. Ms. Bellamy. Lucas stepped forward. You can't be here. She's under guardianship. The attorney didn't move, temporarily, and improperly. Mom crossed her arms. On what authority? He set the briefcase down and opened it with care. Frederick Bellamy's. That name landed hard. Lucas scoffed. My grandfather's dead. Which is why he planned ahead. The attorney laid a document on the table. Thick. Tabbed. Familiar paper stock. This is Clause 14, subsection B of the trust, he continued. It governs challenges to a beneficiary's mental capacity. Lucas leaned in, eyes scanning fast. A trust doesn't override a court order. It does when the order was obtained through misrepresentation. Mom's voice sharpened. That's an accusation. Yes, the attorney replied evenly. And it's documented. He slid another file forward. Independent evaluation. Completed voluntarily. Within the last week. I recognized the header. My name. Clean margins. Official seal. Lucas's jaw tightened. That doctor lost his license 3 years ago. The attorney cut in. Your affidavit relies on outdated records and a discredited opinion. Silence stretched. Mom's confidence wavered. Just a flicker. So what happens now? The attorney turned to Lucas. The guardianship petition is void. Filing it under these conditions constitutes perjury and abuse of process. Lucas laughed, sharp and quick. You're reaching. The attorney met his eyes. Federal authorities disagree. That was when Lucas shifted tactics. He looked at me, softer now. Nora, we don't need to do this the hard way. Mom stared at him. What are you doing? He ignored her. Sign a settlement. 10%. Quiet exit. You'll never have to worry again. The room went still. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of the house under my feet. You already decided what I was worth. He smiled, strained. This is generous. I shook my head once. It's late. The attorney closed his briefcase. I'll let the officers know. Mom's voice cracked. You're choosing this. I looked at her. Really looked. You chose first. Footsteps sounded on the porch. Measured. Official. Lucas backed toward the door. Breath shallow. You're making a mistake. I stayed where I was. The knock came. Firm and final. No one moved to stop it. The house didn't feel empty after they left. It felt quieter in a different way. Like a room after the air conditioning shuts off and you realize how loud it was before. I slept in my old bedroom that night, the one with the narrow window and the uneven floorboard near the door. In the morning, light came through the curtains without asking permission. The phone didn't ring. No messages. No last words. I walked through the rooms slowly, not checking for damage, just noticing. The chipped corner of the kitchen table, the place on the banister where Grandpa's hand used to rest when he climbed the stairs. In the library, I set the chess book back on the shelf. The cover was still warped. I left it that way. Later, a call came in from the attorney. Brief, practical. He outlined next steps, timelines. What would be handled without me? I thanked him and hung up. In the afternoon, I made tea and sat by the window. I watched the driveway until the shadows shifted and the day moved on. When I finally spoke out loud, it was only to myself. It's done. The words didn't echo. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt settled, like I'd put something back where it belonged. That night, I reset the chessboard on the small table by the window. I lined the pieces carefully, then paused. I removed one black pawn and slipped it into my pocket. Not as a trophy, just a reminder. Nora Bellamy didn't win by being louder. She didn't win by proving anyone wrong. She won by staying present when it would have been easier to disappear, before turning out the light. I opened my phone and saved one new contact, a quiet legal fund Frederick had once mentioned, half-formed, never finished. I sent a short message offering help. Nothing public. Nothing loud. If this story stays with you, you already know why. At Revenge Sins, we don't rush the end of stories like this. We let them settle. Nora's did.